The tension in the packed courthouse was electric. Judge Joe Brown, the 76-year-old television legend known for his booming voice and no-nonsense attitude, sat behind his mahogany bench with fire in his eyes. Across the room, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood tall in her sharp navy blazer, her natural hair styled perfectly, ready for what everyone sensed was about to become a historic showdown. The case had started as a simple civil matter, but when Crockett appeared as a witness, everything changed. Brown had been watching the news, seeing her viral moments in Congress, and he wasn't impressed. The moment she stepped up to give testimony, his famous temper flared. "Ms. Crockett," Brown's voice boomed across the courtroom, making everyone jump. "You think because you got some fancy title in Washington, you can come into my courtroom and disrespect the process?" His words echoed off the walls like thunder. The packed gallery fell silent, phones already recording what they sensed would be the confrontation of the year. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her eyes met his with a steady gaze that said she was ready for whatever he was about to throw at her. The 33-year-old Congresswoman had faced down Republican leaders, gone viral for her quick wit, and now she was about to show Judge Joe Brown that his courtroom bark wouldn't intimidate her. What happened next left the entire courtroom speechless and sent social media into a frenzy that would dominate headlines for weeks. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of these explosive political moments. This wasn't just another day in court. This was about to become the moment when a rising Democratic star reminded an old-school television judge that times have changed, and his outdated approach wouldn't fly anymore. To understand the magnitude of what was about to unfold, you need to know exactly who these two powerhouses are and why this confrontation mattered so much to millions of Americans watching. Judge Joe Brown had built his reputation over decades as television's toughest judge. From his days as a real-day prosecutor in Memphis to becoming a household name with his courtroom show, Brown was known for one thing: putting people in their place with his booming voice and old-school authority. At 76, he represented a generation that believed respect came from fear, that volume equaled power, and that young people needed to be put in their place. Brown had presided over thousands of cases, made millions of dollars from his television career, and built a reputation as someone you didn't mess with. His supporters loved him for telling it like it is and not backing down from anyone. In his mind, his courtroom was his kingdom, and everyone who entered should bow to his authority. His approach had worked for decades in television court, where people came seeking his judgment and were generally grateful for any resolution he provided. Participants on his show knew what they were signing up for. They expected to be challenged, questioned, and sometimes dressed down by the famously tough judge. The format rewarded his aggressive style, and audiences loved watching him put difficult people in their place. But real courtrooms operated under different rules than television sets. Here, witnesses weren't contestants seeking prizes or resolution. They were citizens fulfilling their civic duties, protected by legal procedures and constitutional rights. The theatrical approach that had made him millions in Hollywood wouldn't necessarily translate to actual legal proceedings. What Brown didn't realize was that the world had changed significantly since his television heyday. Social media now meant that every interaction could become public instantly. Camera phones had democratized documentation, meaning that authority figures could no longer rely on their word alone when disputes arose about what had happened behind closed doors. More importantly, the generation now coming into positions of power had grown up questioning authority in ways that previous generations hadn't. They had been raised to believe that respect was earned through competence and character, not demanded through position and volume. They had watched countless viral videos of authority figures being held accountable for abusive behavior, and they understood that staying quiet in the face of intimidation was no longer their only option. But on this particular Tuesday morning, he was facing someone who represented everything he couldn't understand about the new generation of leaders. Jasmine Crockett had risen from a young lawyer in Dallas to become one of the most recognizable faces in Congress. At just 33, she had already made headlines for her sharp questioning during committee hearings, her ability to break down complex issues for everyday Americans, and her refusal to be intimidated by anyone, regardless of their age, position, or reputation. Crockett's path to Congress hadn't been easy or traditional. She had grown up in a working-class family where education was valued, but not guaranteed. Her parents had worked multiple jobs to ensure she could attend college, and she had paid her way through law school by working nights at a local firm, filing documents and learning the practical side of legal work that many of her classmates would never experience. Her early legal career had been spent defending families who couldn't afford high-powered attorneys. She had represented workers who had been cheated out of wages, tenants facing unfair evictions, and small business owners being steamrolled by corporate interests. These experiences had taught her that the legal system often favored those with power and resources, and that sometimes the only way to level the playing field was to refuse to be intimidated by those who thought their position gave them the right to bully others. When she decided to run for Congress, many political insiders dismissed her as too young, too inexperienced, too willing to challenge the established order. But voters in her district saw something different. They saw someone who had actually lived the struggles they faced, someone who understood what it meant to work for everything you had, and someone who wouldn't change who she was just because she moved to Washington. Her congressional career had been marked by moments that went viral, not because she sought attention, but because she refused to back down when confronted with what she saw as injustice or hypocrisy. She had a particular talent for asking the kinds of questions that made powerful people uncomfortable, and for doing so in a way that was both respectful and devastating.